Parenting is hard. It can also be rewarding, but getting through the grind to the good stuff can be a real struggle. And all of us could use some inspiration, encouragement, or just a reminder that we aren't alone on this journey. Sometimes even parents need a timeout.
Hey parents, welcome to Parents Time Out. I'm Kim Botto. Parenting is not meant to be done in isolation. So that's why once a week we get together, we join together with other parents, learning from each other, sharing ideas, and just having some great conversation. And tonight, I'm excited to introduce you to Justin and Sara Mosteller. Justin is the worship leader. Hey guys.
Hey Kim.
Justin's a worship leader at Crossroads, Oakley. Sara used to be a teacher, and now she stays home with her kids. And they're the parents of 4 kids, ages 3 to 7. Is that right?
Yes.
That's right.
I just want you to know, if you hear like howling in the background, it's actually not the Mosteller kids, it's the neighbor kids. So
that's true.
All good.
That's right.
The Mosteller kids are safely in their beds.
If you hear other sounds, it's definitely our kids.
Right.
Just the howling's not them.
That's right. So we're so glad you're here. And if you're watching, let us know where you're watching from. And then also if you have any questions of Justin and Sara, because we'll get to those later. But before we get started, Justin leads worship, as I said, for Oakley. And so he also leads worship on Crossroads' Facebook page many days. Mm-hmm. And he said, the kids are a part of it a lot. And the reason is because they were awakened in the house. I mean, what are you going to do?
Right.
So
where are you going to go?
I can't imagine being on live video with 4 kids on a regular basis. I'm sure there's been some interesting things that have happened. So why don't you share with us some of the most interesting things that have happened live with your kids?
Yeah.
Well, so the last time we decided from the beginning that we wanted Facebook worship to be something that we did as a family in the evening. At 7:00, there was nothing we could do with our kids except for involve them in it. And so we did, and it looked like a whole lot of craziness. And the last time that we did Facebook worship, we had a 2-year-old, not quite 3 yet, and who was potty training. And he comes over to me and tells me that his butt hurts, which usually means that he has to poop. And I'm trying to be like, okay, shh, like Papa's singing, just, 3 more songs and it'll be a minute. He comes back over a few minutes later. My butt hurts. And this time he stinks. And so I'm like, oh gosh, but I pulled out his shorts and I was like, oh, there's no poop there and there's no underwear. So it's fine. You're all fine. We took off the diaper after nap time. Nobody put underwear on him. It's fine. You got shorts on. Just go play. 2 minutes later, Justin's still playing. We're all singing. He comes back over and it's like, my butt hurts. And for some reason, out of the corner of my eye, I just happened to glance that there was poop behind me on the carpet. So I drag him by the arm and
not mine.
As discreetly as I can, drag him across the screen and take him to the bathroom. And then I have to stand in the kitchen waiting for Justin to finish singing, all 3 kids, big kids, to just finish worshiping. And they have no idea what has happened. And as soon as the camera stops, I'm like, Weston pooped on the carpet. I need you to know during daily worship. Like, what do I do? And so we get it all cleaned up, long story short. And then I was like, here's the thing. I didn't know, do I tell all those parents? Because we had a lot of parents engaging, saying it's super helpful to watch your 2-year-old rolling around on the floor and your 4-year-old running around chasing cars or knocking his brother off the couch behind you. Like, that's what worship looks like on Tuesday night for us. And so we had a lot of encouragement. And I wanted to let all those parents know, he just pooped on the carpet in the middle of daily worship, people. And then evening daily worship was canceled, and I never got to let everybody know. So hopefully some of them are on here now, and they get to hear it. And
I had no idea.
Real life with the Mostellers. This is great. We're not even 5 minutes in, and we're sharing poop stories. This is great. What about you, Justin? What was the most unexpected or funny thing that happened with your kids as you were leading?
I don't know. I mean, I remember, so yeah, it's the pandemic and COVID and home isolation. So everything sort of runs together and we're together all nonstop. And I remember we finished one night of of worship, and maybe a half hour later we go do bedtime, put the kids down, and I get a text from D-Val, from David Valentine, who was on a couple weeks ago, him and his wife with you. And D-Val texted me and said, watching your family worship is amazing. The Santa jammies that your daughter had on were amazing to us. And he's like laughing. And I didn't even realize she was wearing full elf Santa jammies.
Here's the thing. In COVID, jammies are now called clothes. Yeah. And so it was just what she'd been wearing for like the last 3 days. Who knew?
So there were these moments where as a dad, you're sitting there like watching her, for instance, in Santa jammies. I didn't even catch the jammy part, but their ability to see themselves on screen for the first time it's both like heartwarming and troubling all in the same breath. Yeah, as they're like, wait, that's me. How do I look on this screen? Look at this, and so those were just, it was full of a lot of fun moments. Mm-hmm. And it created so much sweetness for our family. That's one of the sweetest memories.
The first 30 minutes of worship, like it didn't look like that every week. It didn't look like that at the beginning. And yet for one time, for 30 minutes, all four of them literally did sit and were mostly engaged. It was evidence of learning and growing. And so, yeah, it was sweet.
But they would start picking the songs for us. The sweetest moment that I had was with my daughter, Eliana. She's 7, as you can see on the screen there. And, she just started to understand it on a different level. Right. And so she's processing. Right. So she had seen me for a long time as a worship leader and praying, and obviously praying for our friends as a family and things. Mm-hmm. And there was one week where she said, "Can I pray at the end?" And I said, "Sure." So I said, "Just help me remember, because sometimes Daddy forgets." Right. And so got to the last song and I felt this little tug on my elbow, and she said, "Can I pray?" I said, "Yeah." So I said, "Eliana, do you want to pray?" And our 7-year-old just started praying for the prayer requests that were coming on Facebook. She just started praying for people and saying, "God, we pray for anyone who's hurting and feels lonely. And I know that you're with them." And I was melting, so one of the sweetest moments for sure as a dad.
Well, and Justin, that comes because Eliana has watched you lead worship and pray for the request that you see popping up. And that's how kids learn. They learn by watching us. So well done that you did that naturally. So, because you are the worship leader, we've talked a lot just tonight about how you worship with your kids. And the topic tonight is, how do we point our kids to God? So obviously, looking at you, we're thinking, okay, we do that through worship, but there's all kinds of other ways to point our kids to God besides singing with the guitar.
Yes.
So what are some ways that you worship with your kids or point them to God?
Well, right now we're pointing them to bed because they're out here on the porch.
Good night.
Down from bed.
Good night.
Night, girls. Good night. I love you.
This is awesome. So good.
Just live right here.
Yeah.
What other ways?
What other
yes.
ways we pointed
I
to
love
Jesus?
This question because they're when we think about if we were to title this "Leading Your Kids in Worship," we would all go, "Oh, I think that means like 5 songs and a 25-minute message, and I've got to be a Bible scholar and a musician all in the same way." And that's absolutely not true. And honestly, music and worship for our family in music was new for us because of COVID. Like, that was a new practice for us. We do worship in a bunch of other ways as a family. And we do music sometimes, but not like we did during daily worship. And so I love this question.
Yeah. I think any of those moments where we can make God bigger than ourselves, that's how we view worship. And so we are constantly looking for ways that we can do that. One of the things we do is we play high-low at the dinner table in the evening. And the last question we ask is high, low, but then we ask, how did your day go? And we ask, what was your God part? So after everybody gets a turn to do their high and low.
Wait, I should say, I mean, we say it's not music, but it
does have a song.
There's a melody to this high-low game in the Mosteller. So
Right.
would you like me to do it?
You should do it.
It's not, okay.
Because you're the
All
not
right,
even
I think
worship
I can
leader.
get
You're the
this.
singer.
So we
You
created
didn't
a
sing.
song for high-low at the dinner table. You can use it for your family. And it goes like this. And everybody has to sing it before they start. So it goes, high, low. How'd your day go? And then we go through. So
Yes.
just some music, I guess.
There is a song.
Uh-huh.
Right. But the last question we ask then is, where did you see God today? And to them, that's the language we came up with. Where did you see God today? It's kind of turned into, what's your God part? But what's the part of your day where you felt like God met you? Was that in somebody's kindness? Was that somebody who shared something with you? Was that a compliment that you received? Was it something you were able to be helpful for with your teacher at school? Or did something go your way that you'd been praying about? Were you worried about something and God took care of that? And just teaching them to be on the lookout for those things so that they realize that God really is in the details and is there in all of those things.
Yeah.
And while it looks kind of like a song, really the heart of that is that we are giving gratitude back to God because of those things and because of meeting us there. So.
Right. And that has changed a little bit during COVID because we're all in the house together all hours of the day. So we all kind of know, I know what your high was, and I certainly know what your low was, right, because we were all part of your low in this time. And but one of the things that started right probably in the second week of the pandemic for us was, hey, gratitude is a really powerful thing. And in a time where everything is changing and the ground seems shifting and we could complain and gripe and moan and groan, or we could choose to be on the lookout for what to be grateful for. And for us, I think gratitude is a great first step into worship. I think gratitude is a great starting place for worship. And so it's not so much what are we grateful for, but who are we grateful for, to it for. And so we just started doing every night, and this started on Daily Worship and Facebook, but it's now continued as a part of our nightly routine. At bedtime, we'll do our story and things like that, but then we do what are you grateful for? And so we just go around and say, hey, choose one thing today, not tomorrow, not yesterday, but one thing today that you're grateful for, and just say, God, I thank you for, and fill in the blank. Mm-hmm. And that's worship. That's the time where our family worships together.
And I just want to encourage parents who are watching, if you try this at home, like I love the idea of asking your kids, what was your God part today? But know that when you first start doing it, your kids might not have a response because they're going to need to practice looking for that. And so parents, what you can do, if you ask your kids and they don't know, well, then tell them what your God part was. And as you do that, they will start running to the dinner table excited to tell you where they saw God. And I'll say too, on the high-low, one of the things we do in our family was when we'd share our high-lows, we would then pray and thank God for the high, and then pray for our siblings and our family members on what was their low for the day, and what was challenging. So that's great. I love that.
Choice. I think a lot of times, especially at the beginning and with the younger kids, the God part sounds like multiple choice. Well, was your God part when this happened, or when this happened, or when this happened? Right? Pick one of those. That's your God part. And giving them the language for what that looks like. That's a great idea, Kim.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's good. We have a question from Aaron. This is a good one. What do you do when a kid is actively choosing to disengage in family worship?
Well, that's a hard question to answer because that's never happened to us, Aaron. It's just never. Right.
Tell the truth.
Oh, the truth. Every moment, that's reality. So, Aaron, you are not
alone.
Not alone at all. You want to?
I would say probably more for me when we started doing daily worship as a family. I was probably more self-conscious than Justin is because I am not used to being on stage and on Facebook and with a lot of people watching. And I all of a sudden felt like a lot of people were watching me parent. And while there was a lot of affirmation, it was also very scary and vulnerable to put myself out there and recognizing I am not their behavior is not totally reflective of my parenting. And so at the beginning, I think we tried to like crack the whip and you have to sit here, you have to sit here. And by week like 9 or 13 or 19, it was like, so if you're playing cards at my feet, so be it. I think we've tried to straddle the line between we want to model what it looks like and not force them into an experience that isn't real or isn't genuine yet. And so if they don't want to engage, I think that's okay. I think watching you engage will eventually turn their hearts to engagement. I don't know. Do you have more?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's great. I think, I mean, for both of us, you joked about that, Kim, like being in front of 1,000 people some nights we're on daily worship, and all of a sudden we're parenting 4 kids, and I'm trying to lead a spiritual moment for those people and things like that. But even I felt super vulnerable in that. I felt like, oh my gosh, my daughter is doing this right now, or my son's playing with his truck,
picking her nose,
and, even this on a very practical level, playing with his trucks, it seemed super loud to me, and it was distracting. And later we went back and watched that time of worship, and no one could hear that thing. And that became a very spiritual truth to me. Like, oh, the thing I was so distracted by and I was blowing out of proportion, not that big of a deal. He's playing with a truck and we're singing about Jesus right next to him. I'll take that every day. So we try, I mean, we do the same thing with story. I think approach it the same way. Like, I want to let my 2-year-old be the 2-year-old and my 7-year-old be the 7-year-old, and know that they're both connecting in a different way, and be okay with that. And remember that, hey, he's 3 and she's 7. So she's really singing. He's not. And that's okay. If I get 60 seconds from him, great. You know?
Right. And I think, to your point, I think it would be especially hard with thousands of people watching you, but we talk a lot on here about our audience is our kids.
Yeah.
Our audience is not all those other people. And if our 3-year-old's playing with the truck, awesome.
He's 3.
We don't need to. Right. That's right. And if somebody judges us because a 3-year-old's playing with the truck, I go, you judge away. So yeah, just remembering that we're responding to our kid. Okay, when you are,
that's a great question, Aaron. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. When you are worshiping, you talked about it earlier. What's your goal when you're worshiping with your kids?
I mean, ultimately, it is that we're trying to shape their heart to Jesus. Like, I'm not trying to make them a professional musician who writes songs about God. I'm trying to make them a person who daily says yes to Jesus. You know, I had a great friend of mine whose kids were much older than me. He was 20 years ahead of me in the game of parenting and leading children and shaping their hearts to Jesus. And his daughter was getting ready to become a missionary. She was 20. She was moving to Africa. And I asked him as a dad, how are you dealing with this? Your baby girl is leaving for Africa and you won't be with her. And she's doing this out of love for Jesus. She thinks Jesus is saying, go do this. And so she's going. And he said, you know what? Since the day one, when we would put them in their cribs, I prayed that they would say yes to Jesus. And that's what we've prayed every day of their life. And so I have to remember at 20 years old, that's the fulfillment of those prayers. And we've done the same. We've taken that prayer when our kids were born and said, this is my nightly prayer. I pray over my kids. I want you to say yes to Jesus. And so that's my goal. My goal is not that they sing the whole song fully. My goal is not that they know every lyric. My goal is not that they know every Bible story. My goal is that they start to see Jesus and know what he may ask of them, what he calls of them, to treat each other with kindness. That's worship. That's what I want to see them say yes to.
Mm-hmm.
So you talked about when you pray at night, you pray that they say yes to Jesus. Is that something you pray over them that they can hear you say? Is that one of your routines during the day?
It is. Yeah, it is. Yeah, has been since they were born and continues to this time. And like, here's as a parent, we pray the same for one another.
Right.
It's not just a prayer that we're like, oh, you little ones, we pray that you say yes to Jesus. No, we say, Lord, would you help us say yes to you today? Mm-hmm. Me as a dad, I want to say yes to you. And so just helping them see that and very simple language, right?
Right. And I think it's so important, though. I mean, you're saying out loud so they can hear you say it. So often the prayers we say for our kids don't ever hear them. And so to say them in such a way that they can hear them, and to have a simple, repeatable phrase that you say every night. I'm sure there are times during the day when they're thinking, oh, how can I say yes to Jesus? Because they've heard you say it so many times. That's really good. Yeah, let's pray out loud over our kids, people.
That's right. But yeah, that's the goal. I mean, the goal for us when we're sitting around the dining table at night and we're saying high, lows, and where's your God part, our goal is that they start to see Jesus. They know that he loves them, cares for them deeply. We just have put in those practices of gratitude and some of those things that's what makes a worshiper, gratitude. I mean, growing up kids who are grateful to God and see him as creator of all good things and perfect things. That's always the goal. Yeah.
Are there other rhythms that you have during the day, or weekly rhythms or monthly rhythms that help point your kids to God? You talked about dinner time and bedtime.
Dinner time. I mean, certainly when, for us, Sunday mornings, we're going to sit down together. They're going to watch Kids Club together and things like that. We go get donuts. So we go get donuts, bring those home. We right now, we try to do a time of rest and no screen time and some of those things as a weekly rhythm and things like that. But for us, I think it's captured in the daily and in that how we wake up and then, how we spend time at dinner, how we go to bed, really taking advantage of those times at night to take a deep breath. Our nights, I don't know about you other parents, our nights are chaos. And at 5 p.m., we find ourselves going, all right, 2.5 more hours before bedtime starts. Let's let the countdown begin,
Or sometimes you're saying, 12 hours before bedtime.
Right.
That early.
Right. Our kids go to bed early.
So it's, and I don't want that, right? That's convicting in me. I know it's going to happen, but I don't want that. I want that time before they go to bed, before they go to sleep. I think that shapes how they sleep and rest. And so it's like, I want that to be this sweet time. It's not all, it's chaos. It is but if we can have a sweet moment where we do the gratitude thing. All right, here's what we do. And now we're making it fun. Literally we're knee, patting our knee, clapping and doing, what are you grateful for? What are you grateful for? We've made it into something fun. So then they can do this dance and then we can say, okay, what are you grateful for? And so making those things interactive. One of the things we started when they were young, and again, it came from me hearing it from somebody else, but we started collecting rocks as a way to collect memories. Like throughout the Bible and throughout time, God wants us to remember his works, remember what he's done, remember moments where he's moved in our lives. And so we started creating rocks as a family years ago, 7 years ago now. And we just have a treasure chest of rocks with Sharpies on them of a date and a place, and then what we felt like God did that day. And so we can pick those rocks back up as a family and go, hey, remember this when you were 3, you were scared to death about this thing. And so we wrote bravery on this rock because you did this. For my girls, it was, hey, remember when you were scared to jump over the wall down at the creek because it was like 6 feet tall and you were terrified. But when you got to the edge of that wall, you went, you go away now. I'm not afraid. I might be little, but my big friend ain't. And they sing this song right there on the bridge. And so we pick up a rock in that space and write the date and write courage. And we come back to those stories to help them remember when God was with you and he made you courageous. And we've tracked those for our family. We probably have, 25, 30 rocks now that we've collected as sort of these God moments, these moments to remember God's with you. He loves you.
It's a journal. You're keeping a journal on rocks, which is so much more tangible for kids than on paper. Because I would think even for your non-readers, they might not be able to read the words, but they might remember what that particular rock represents. That's
now they
so
pick
good.
their own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's, as we're talking about worship, I know when we talked earlier, you were talking about taking cookies to your neighbors.
Yeah.
And making that, because I think a lot of parents, when they think about worship, they, like you said, you got to have a guitar and a 30-minute devotion, which rarely would work with a 3-year-old, or even a 23-year-old. But how do you make simple acts like that, simple gestures like taking cookies to the neighbor? How do you make that an act of worship and communicate that to your kids?
Yeah, I think it's sharing the why behind what we're doing. You know, like it's talking to them about, hey, this is what Jesus would want us to do. This is what Jesus has done for us. He loved us like this. And so the cookies thing.
Yeah. So in response to the Ahmaud Arbery situation, we talked to our kids about it. And it's probably the first time that we have very blatantly and somewhat uncensored talked to them about some of the racial issues. And so we just told them what happened to this innocent man and how unfair and not right and horrifying it was. And then Justin and I were out running. So then that evening we ended up taking a walk, and we just said, let's go and pray for our neighbors. Like, their family isn't getting to go and walk without being afraid like our family does. And so we're going to walk our neighborhood.
Well, it was Mother's Day weekend.
Mother's Day weekend, yeah.
And we talked to our kids about Ahmaud Arbery's mother is hurting this weekend and not experiencing Mother's Day like your mama's getting to. And so we're going to walk our neighborhood and we're going to pray for Ahmaud's mother. And we talked to them, and then we were out for a run. We were out running the next morning and just thinking, like, what else do we do? We have a few Black families that live in our neighborhood. And it was like, what do? We live in Liberty Township, so it's predominantly white. And we didn't want to just sit and be silent. So we took cookies to the families that are Black that are in our neighborhood and just wrote a little note that said, we're neighbors. We haven't met you yet. But we know that things are going on, and we don't have the right words, but we don't want to not say anything. And so here's our phone number and our address. And if you ever need anything, give us a call. And we thought we would probably have to leave that note in the cookies, but both houses answered. And they've built up some friendships, and it was actually a really sweet thing as a way to just say, we're with you and we're for you. It was, here's how we'll choose to worship today. We don't use that word with them, but when it's that we're going to love people like Jesus loved people. We're going to see people like Jesus sees them. And so here's how we get to love our neighbor. And it was like, it means we're not going to eat the cookie dough out of the bin before we give it to us. Or it means we're going to plate all the cookies and give the best cookies to our neighbors. And then we will keep the 6 left over for us, right? Like that, those were conversations even, and then, but. Yeah. And that started a bunch of conversations.
Right. Because it's a simple activity. I think so often we make it so complicated, but we can take delivering cookies to our neighbors and use to point our kids to God. We're going to have one last question from John Giltner. I think this is a good one to end on. And that, how do you think worshiping as a family has equipped them for daily childhood challenges? And remembering that worship isn't just guitar and Justin singing. Because there might be some parents that think it's just too hard and not worth the trouble. But I think when we see how it helps equip them, it might give parents the kind of courage and incentive to actually try it. So how have you seen it equip your kids for challenges? So I know Justin talked about it earlier, but the first thing I think about is our 6-year-old Elise. She is the most fearless and the most scared out of all of them at the exact same time. And she has such an incredible willpower and strength of mind that when she says she can't do something, it's over and she can't, and you can't convince her otherwise. But so she's been wanting to ride a 2-wheeler for a long time and can do everything except for actually get on it and ride it. And the day that she did it, she said to me afterwards, I was really scared,
but I just knew that I could say, God, I'm really scared and I need you to be with me. And then I just took off. And I think at 6, like she gets it. She knows that, when we're scared or when we're overwhelmed, or when things are going great, I can say, thank you, God, for making this all go great. And seeing that in her is super, super affirming for the millions of times we're getting it wrong every other day.
I think it's being an open book with our children to see how I'm praying to God right now. I mean, even this morning, we were, I was in a meeting and I found out a friend passed away, and my daughter walked into my Zoom meeting like she's done 1,000 times during this time, but she walked in to me hurting in that moment and choosing to worship Jesus and say, Jesus, I love you and trust you, and I'm thankful for that friend who served you well. And rather than sort of do what I was tempted to do in that moment, like wipe my tears away and say, Daddy's okay. I'm okay. Right. Yeah. Daddy's fine, because I don't want her to hurt for me or something. No, I just said, Daddy's sad right now because a friend of mine who loved Jesus with her whole life passed away, and she loved Jesus and she lived well, and she was serving people as she passed away. And I'm thankful to God, and I'm really sad, but I'm really rejoicing for her. My daughter just sat on my lap, and we just sat there in that moment. I think those are moments we get to share with our kids to shape how we grieve, how we're grateful. Why would I choose to be grateful in a time like this? And there's just constant moments where I want to invite them into the conversation that I'm having with God and be open about that. It is not fancy. We don't sit down for a Bible study every night. We don't do all those things. We sit and have open conversations about life and where God is in that life and how we're trying to follow and say yes to Jesus every day.
It's a whole bunch of little moments, not one big hour-long session. And Justin, what you did this morning, though, was you invited her into your pain. You weren't trying to protect her. You're trying to prepare her for the pain that she's going to experience in the future.
That's exactly right.
She can see how you are processing that pain while also having faith and trusting God. So well done. Well, we're out of time. So as we finish, thank you so much. Are there any final thoughts you'd like to leave those who are watching with?
You have one, and then
he talked about it a little bit, but I would just say, model. They are watching, right? They're watching everything. And that was a part of the Facebook worship for us. Like, if I model singing with my hands fully raised, then my 7, 6, and 5-year-old are raising their hands and singing. And while the 6-year-old might also be twerking in her Santa jammies and watching herself on screen, and it might be way more about the selfie moment, eventually her heart will catch up to the body. But by then, that physical practice of worship will already be established. And so letting go of the imperfections and letting go of myself, like, if I don't raise my hands in worship, how is she going to learn to do that, right? If I don't do this, how are they going to learn? And so for me, that's been freeing and challenging, to just live it out loud in front of them.
Yeah. And I would say we get to be their worship leaders. As parents, we get to be their worship leaders. And a worship leader is somebody who helps someone else see Jesus, helps someone else know Jesus, see him. And so that's what you get to be as a parent. And so if you've known Jesus for a week or you've known Jesus for 10 years, you get to be their worship leader and get to share with them, here's who Jesus is. Here's how I see Jesus. And maybe you're learning to pray to Jesus yourself, all those things, but you get this joy and privilege every day to be their worship leader. And it's a sweet responsibility and a sweet calling that we have now as parents.
That's worship leaders. What did you say? As a worship leader, we help them see Jesus?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Worship leaders help them see Jesus, and we don't have to have any musical ability to do that.
Right.
I think we get caught up on that. That's so good. Well, Justin and Sara, thank you so much for being on here with us tonight. I know a lot of parents were super encouraged by this, and I can't wait to hear stories of how they try some of these things. And I just want to point out, I think books are also a help in pointing kids to God. So I just want to share, this is our favorite Bible in Kids Club, the Jesus Storybook Bible. It is good for little bitties. And I gave this to my 80-plus-year-old mother-in-law for a gift. And she goes, but it's a kid's Bible. And then the next Christmas, she gave it to all her friends because it's so good. Every story points to Jesus, and it's such a great way to train our kids. And then this book right here, have you guys seen this?
No.
God, very good idea. Awesome, awesome book. And it also has peoples of all different shapes and sizes and ethnicities. And it just talks about being in God's family. This is another great book to use to point your kids to God. So parents, thank you so much for watching. Abby Rasmussen just said she's going to go find a rock right now. She's going to start journaling on rock. We're going to do that too. So parents, thanks for watching. Next week, we're going to have Gail Chichak. She is a Kids Club volunteer, and she's also a therapist at Tried and True Parenting. So join us next week at 8:30. Justin and Sarah, I hope your kids are asleep by the time you go back in the house. And we will see everybody next week. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim.
Good night.
Thank you.